because now this next interview is the bomb. If you have really enjoyed all the interviews that we have been doing so far and have taken something away from it, this interview is very near and dear. Not because I can relate, but because I sense that a lot of people out here will be able to relate. If you have ever grew up in a family of a certain religion or a certain background and found it very hard to kind of differentiate and do your own thing because that's not what was expected from you, et cetera, et cetera, you're going to really, really, really enjoy this interview. And even if you aren't, please do not do yourself a disservice. Corey Nathan got on the show and laid it all out. He shared a lot of great information, and I really enjoyed this interview, and I hope that you guys enjoyed this interview as much as I did. So let's get into it. And welcome back to another episode of God, Coffee, and Resilience with Reese. I hope everybody is doing great on this wonderful Monday morning. But today I have a surprise guest with me. His name is Corey Nathan, and today he's going to share his story of resilience. Good afternoon, Corey.
Good afternoon, Reese. It is so good to hang out with you. Thanks for having me.
Yes, of course. When I heard your story and when your email came across, I was like, of course, this is one that I would love to do because I'm pretty sure there are a lot of other people that kind of went through a similar event, such as you, a similar background and things like that. And so I was like, hey, even if it's not of the exact same thing, at least they'll be able to relate and it's going to help someone. So thank you for taking the time out of your day to be here.
Sure thing. Sure thing. So now I remember writing to you about two different momentous chapters in our life. One was when I first became a Christian. And then the other one,
Yes.
I think the one that you're referring to is those times in 2008, 2009 that were pretty rough for us financially. And is that the one that you're talking about?
Right. Yeah, I kind of want to dive into both of them if we have enough time. Like, I definitely want to touch on both of them. And if I have to get you to come back, I hope that you would. But
Absolutely. Well, I already enjoy hanging out with you, so I'd love to make it a habit, like my
yes, hint,
coffee
hint.
habit.
Yes, by the way, we always start off with an icebreaker. So you got to tell me, what is your favorite coffee, your favorite caffeinated drink? Like, what's your favorite thing?
Well, I start every day with my tea. I start with an Earl Grey tea
Okay.
typically, but that just
Uh
kind of
huh.
warms me up for my coffee. And I don't put
Same.
any extra stuff in it except I do use
Hmm.
one stevia. So that's how I do my coffee, just plain
Oh
and
my goodness.
with one stevia. That's it.
Wait, you're a black drinker.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. That's right. That's right. I like it. It's good. I don't make it too strong, but it's a good way to
Uh
start the
huh.
day. And I usually don't have it in the middle of the day, but I figured I'm hanging out with Reese
Hmm.
today. I'm going to have some coffee.
God, coffee, and resilience.
That's
I
right.
love it. I love it. Well, thank you for telling us about your favorite coffee, but I got another icebreaker for you.
Okay.
So, what are three things about you that most people don't know?
Oh boy. Um, well, I've been sharing this with some close friends.
Hmm.
When I was a little boy, my mom had to go to work pretty much right away, right after I was born. So we lived
Yeah.
in a neighborhood in New York, and there was this great Italian family next to us, the Manunis, and Ida Manuni was the matron of that family, and she watched all of us. There was a whole
Uh-huh.
gaggle of us around the neighborhood, and I always thought that I was her favorite because at the end of every day, she'd take my head in her hands, my face in her
Uh-huh.
hands. She'd kiss me on the head and say "faccia brutta, faccia brutta," and I just thought it was her pet name for me. And if anybody speaks
Uh-huh.
Italian out there, you know already. But it took me. I was about 30 years old. I started speaking a little bit of Italian. I found out she was calling me monster face, ugly face. So
What?
yeah, yeah. I thought it was her pet name. I was her favorite. All the whole time she's calling me monster face.
And it sounds so sweet with the accent, and
Yeah,
you're just like, it gotta be something sweet. And
yeah.
she's like, monster face. Poor lady.
No, I mean Ida's still alive, thank goodness. I think she must
Yes.
be about 90 or in her 90s. But I called her out on it. I said, Ida, I got to go to therapy now. I got to do something. My whole
Yeah.
view of like how you thought of me,
It
and
was all wrong.
she said the typical. She said, well, it loses its meaning in the translation. So So that's just one thing. Faccia bruta.
Yeah.
Let's see. Another one is
Chabuca.
oh gosh, I think a lot of people do know this about me, but I play poker. I'm not a gambler.
Poker.
I play poker,
Uh-huh.
which is a different thing. Um,
Right.
so it because to me, like playing poker is like you're not playing against the house, you're playing against other people. And if you play really
Right.
good basic strategy, it's definitely a strategy game. So I really enjoy that. But I also enjoy
Okay.
how it illuminates human behavior. You know, poker really brings
Huh.
out more often than not the our proclivities, but it
Uh-huh.
also trains our discipline if we know how to play the game to stay by what we know is the best way to play. So that's another one. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then
Interesting.
let's see, a third one might be that I started out as a stockbroker during the day. I got licensed. I actually earned my license when I was still 19, Series 7, Series 63. But I was doing
Uh-huh.
that during the day to put myself through a theater conservatory. So I had some folks know. I don't know if nobody knows that, but that's a little bit of
Uh-huh.
trivia. I was a stockbroker during the day, going to a theater conservatory at night. So it was an interesting time.
Oh, wow. And for the people who don't know what theater conservatory is, such as myself, what is that?
Well, basically, it's just a place where you go to study great literature, where you study methods of acting, where you study
Uh-huh.
stagecraft. You study
Cool.
it you study theater basically, but it was a private small school, if you want to call it that. It was a part school, part ensemble, and I really
Uh-huh.
learned a lot about the great method acting teachers and some, so we learned a little bit of classical, but definitely learned a
Yeah.
lot of great literature in the process. So yeah,
Yeah, and that's cool because I think in undergrad I did two plays, and I had to at least be familiar with downstage and all that stuff. And I was like, "Oh Lord!"
yeah,
I like acting because I get to become someone else.
yeah.
But I never did anything else after that, though, and that was
Oh
in
man.
undergrad.
Okay. All right. Well, it's fun.
Yeah.
It's a fun way to learn about great stories, and depending on what kind of plays you're doing, some great literature. So it's a really good way to start to understand
Mhm.
other characters and great writing. So it really is a good way to, as Glenn Close once said, disturb the molecules in a shared community experience.
I like that. Disturb the molecules. I like that.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you, what was it like growing up for you? Like, do you have siblings or like kind of where did you grow up and where are you now?
Yeah. My family's all from New York. So we started out, my family's all from Brooklyn. When I was born, by the time I was born, my parents were in Staten Island with my older brother, Eddie. And then by the
Cool.
time I was 6, we moved out to central New Jersey. So I grew up mostly
Mm-hmm.
in New Jersey. And you're probably way too young for this, but if you've ever heard the song My Hometown by Bruce Springsteen, that's actually my
Mm-mm.
hometown. So maybe look it up on Spotify or something like that. But Bruce,
I will.
yeah, Bruce
Okay,
and I
cool.
had even had some of the same teachers in high school. Dr.
Uh-huh.
Robert M. Hussey, he was our English teacher, gave us both a love for language and poetry and Shakespeare. So
Awesome.
yeah,
Okay, because I grew up in Newark, New Jersey.
okay,
Um, but we moved, gosh, when I was like in second grade. So that's all I know, like
yeah,
a little bit of it. And then we came back for a couple of summers. But for the most part, I was in South Carolina with my grandparents because they were getting older.
okay,
And my mom was like, okay, I'm gonna come back down there. I'm gonna help them
yeah.
out as they're in retirement stage. And then my grandpa passed in 2015. So we were down there for a while for like a good chunk of my childhood onto high school and teenage years and blah blah blah.
And do you live in that area? What part of the country are you in now?
I'm in Texas, so I call myself a mutt. I went from New Jersey to South Carolina to Virginia to Texas, and I just got to Texas this year in May.
Oh,
In
okay. Where
May,
in Texas are you?
I'm in Plano.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know Plano. I love
Yeah,
Dallas. I love Austin. Spent especially Austin. I have a soft spot. For Sixth Street. You can spend a lot of
right.
time on Sixth Street. The music, kind of that little strip
Sixth
there.
Street.
Yeah, in Austin. But
Okay.
um, But I was going to say
Cool.
the other thing about my youth is I grew up in a very observant Jewish family. We went to an
Uh-huh.
Orthodox synagogue. We did, kept kosher, observed all the holidays. We were very observant, but I think I told you this in my late 20s. I became a Christian, so that was something.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was something.
How did we cross that bridge? Like, how did you cross the bridge? You said y'all was like an Orthodox Jewish family, very conservative culture, and then for you to switch, like what was that turning point, or what influenced you to come to Christianity?
That's an interesting way to ask the question because usually folks ask me for kind of a straightforward testimony when this subject
Uh-huh.
comes up, but that's an interesting way to ask that question. What was that turning point, or what led you to that? And
Yeah.
I think what it was I've always. Oh, my dog's coming in. She got a bath today. She's a. It's Bailey Abigail. Um,
Hey, Bailey.
uh, I think by the time I was in my mid-teens, I was starting to zero in on what you might think of as existential questions. Like
Uh-huh.
how did all of this, the universe, how did it all begin? Like where is it going?
Yeah.
What's wrong with the universe? Is
Right.
there some sort of salvation? Is there the way we might think of it now? But just kind of where's it all from? Where's it all going? What's wrong with it? And can
Yeah.
we be a part of fixing it all?
Mm-hmm.
So I think I was ripe for the right circumstances to. I had these mentors in my late 20s. I was starting to think about having a family. We were married already. Me and Lisa were married already, and we were starting to think about
Uh-huh.
having a family. I was starting out in business, and
Right.
I was looking for mentorship. And this one fella in particular, great dad, great husband, great in the community, really really successful business person. And
Mm-hmm.
he I would go to him for recommendations for like books or classes or speakers to listen to, and he always
Right.
gave me Christian books. He always gave me like I'm like, dude, you gave me another Jesus book? What's up with you, man? So he finally, I thought I was calling him out on it because he happened to be like me. He grew up Jewish, but he became a Christian
Right.
at a certain point. And I thought
Uh-huh.
he was trying to do it to get under my skin. Like, dude, I'm a Jew. Not only that, I'm a Jew from Jersey. So like all this like
Uh-huh.
planting Jesus seeds, it's not flying. Like, don't do that. Just like give me a business book.
Gonna say that he was planting seeds.
Yeah, yeah. So finally, I wanted to call him out on it and say, "What's up with you? Like, why did you become a Christian? You're like you were on my home team. Now you're part of the other side. I love you, Hal." But he's like, he gave me this. He gave me another Jesus book. It was called More Than a Carpenter by Josh
Uh-huh.
McDowell, and it was the first time anybody I had read any account that tried to make an empirical case for the life, death, and
Uh-huh.
resurrection of Jesus. And I honestly, I didn't find that small version of the book of McDowell's argument very compelling. It more just kind of ticked me
Mhm.
off, but it ticked me off enough for me to ask some more questions. And I got a bigger
Right.
version of the book called Evidence That Demands a Verdict. And then I started
Huh.
asking theological questions. So I started getting like C.S. Lewis and G.K. Chesterton stuff. And then
Uh-huh.
I was all kinds of confused. And
Right.
and I started thinking maybe there's some more meat to this on this bone. So I actually
Right.
started refreshing. I had studied a lot of other world religions and philosophies along the way, so I started dipping back into that to see if the answers to those basic questions were as coherent in other philosophies that I'd looked at. And sorry, this is a long story, but long story short,
Oh,
I fin- I
that's
finally got
good.
to the point where I still hadn't read the New Testament. So
Huh.
eh, after having done all that study, especially G.K. Chesterton stuff, Orthodoxy
Mhm.
was one of his great kind of distilled pieces of theology. Obviously, a lot of people know
Right.
Mere Christianity from C.S. Lewis. I said I got to read this.
Mhm.
I got to read these letters. This New Testament collection. So I started with
Right.
James, which is a good one for me because it's written to the 12 tribes, which I resonated with. Like, hey, he's
Yes.
writing that to the Jews. He's writing that to me. And then I went to
Uh-huh.
Matthew and just started at the beginning. And what really got me was about 5 chapters in. this Jesus,
Mm-hmm.
I still looked at him as a Jesus character. I wasn't quite ready to like embrace the whole Son of God thing yet. But I said, man, this
Yes.
Jesus character, he's doing what Jews would think of as a devar Torah, like an
Right.
explanation of a Torah portion that they were talking about. And
Mm-hmm.
this is the most brilliant devar Torah I'd ever read or heard. And it was a Sermon on the Mount. So from there, I just
Oh,
kept on
yes.
reading. In about a day and a half, I read through Revelation. Yeah, Revelation 22, and then I was ready to. I don't know what I was ready to do, but I was like, it was just the most. After everything, several months of reading obsessively and thinking, and just kind of processing all this stuff, I was ready to what my friends were calling give my life to the Lord. It didn't really make a ton of sense to me, but the last little bit of that is the prayer. Being a Jew, you have an actual organized prayer for everything. Baruch atah Hashem, I'm a Christian now, or whatever. There's a organized prayer for everything. So I asked Hal what the prayer was, and he said, "No, man, just talk to God." I'm like, "What do you mean, just talk to? Give me the prayer. I can't just talk to God." He said, "No, just talk to God."
It's open.
So,
Yeah, he's here.
yeah, yeah. So I talked to God,
Wow.
and
Okay.
I woke up the next. Yeah, I woke up the next morning, and I I told my wife, "Hey, Lise, I think I'm a Christian now." And the first thing she's from Alabama, so she grew up getting dragged to church, but she hadn't become a Christian yet. And she said, "If you think you're going to drag me to
Right.
church, you got another thing coming." So she it
No.
was a little while before she came to the Lord.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah. But the other part of that though is I think what you sorry about the long story, but uh,
No.
being a Jew.
Mhm.
About a month later, it was Thanksgiving, and I had to go back and tell my parents. And some funny stuff, if looking back about how they reacted.
Uh-huh.
But my dad, my dad is a very important figure in my life. He's a very, very important person in my life. And
Mhm.
about a month after I told him, he wrote me this 10-page single-spaced letter explaining all the reasons why I can't and must not become a Christian. And he hit it from like every angle you could imagine. He gave me historical examples. He tried to make a
Uh-huh.
logical case against the divinity of Christ. He tried to,
Mhm.
obviously came at it from a filial obligation point of view,
Right.
and how I was betraying, generations upon generations that had sacrificed for us to be Jews. And that he he won't say this, but I came to understand later that he considered
Mhm.
doing what's called sitting Shiva. And in Judaism, that is a ritual you go through when I'm going to get emotional thinking about it. When somebody
Yes.
in your family dies. So
Uh-huh.
it was that serious to him. He didn't go through with it
Right.
because he would say that his relationship with his son was even more important than whether I was a Jew or a Christian. So
Right.
that plus the 10-page single spaced letter began a conversation with us that
Right.
in many ways continues to this day. That was over 20 years ago. So, yeah.
Wow. So you got me at the 10-page paper.
Yeah.
Single space,
Yeah.
12
Yeah.
font times New Roman.
Something like that. Yeah. Yeah. It probably was. No, my dad probably was. He was probably typing it out on an old typewriter, too.
Oh no. Yeah, like he really meant business. He really meant he was like literally these are all the reasons why you cannot.
Yeah.
But what and this might be me because I've never of course I've never studied like being a Jew or anything like that, but Jesus was a Jew.
He
So
was.
I'm just like, well,
Yeah.
why so I'm like what is the other side of that? What is Jewish teaching then?
So
Like what is
it's a great question. So my father now has a much more nuanced view of who Jesus was, but
Mhm.
understand that it's taken 20 something years for us to get to this point. The first
Right.
we I thought there are some guys I was hanging out with and gals that I was hanging out with that were thoroughly
Mhm.
convinced that you could bring anybody to the Lord in one conversation or less, and I just don't think that is the norm. That may very well happen, but I just don't think that's the
Yeah,
norm. I think that
right.
folks coming to the Lord is more often than not the result of an army of prayer warriors, and God obviously in the middle of it, but also God revealing Himself through the ways that He reveals Himself. Like for me in
Yes.
Scripture, it's His Word. Of course, it was powerful for me. I talk about reading James and then going to Matthew, but like when I got to John, is it John? Is it John? I think it starts with, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word is with God, and the Word was God.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's John. Lord, that scripture hit me. I'll come back to that. But yes.
yeah. So it was hitting me through that. It was hitting me through the body of Christ. The people that I was
Right.
relating to and the relationships that were being built and people that were investing and breathing life into me, right? So
Right.
my conversations with my dad started out very adversarial. That letter was
Hmm.
not like, hey, I think this is a great idea. That letter did not reflect how to win friends and influence people. It was like, this is bad. This is a sin. You're
Right.
betraying all of us. And this is why. So
Hmm.
we just committed to like having the conversation. So I'd recommend a book, he'd recommend a book. So I'd recommend something like Mere Christianity. C.S.
Yes.
Lewis is one of his great works, and he'd send me a book
Hmm.
by a rabbi called "You Take Jesus, I'll Take God." It was very, very adversarial. Um,
Yes.
but eventually, I sent him stuff like N.T. Wright has some great stuff. And
Uh-huh.
my dad read some of the longer ones. Like he has those big books, and my dad read some
Yeah.
of those longer ones. Um, and he came to, and he read some theology too. He read parts of the New Testament, and he actually now has I think I'm expressing this correctly, that he believes that Jesus may very well have been not only the tzaddik, which is like the great rabbi of his generation. He
Uh-huh.
may very well have been, and probably should have been, accepted as a prophet, the way that Malachi, Isaiah, Ezekiel, like of the great prophets. And
Hmm.
he's very specific about the whole Messiah thing. He says he could have
Yeah.
been, he might have even been a Mashiach, a Messiah candidate, but he was a failed candidate. So he doesn't quite get to the point of saying he was Mashiach, he was Messiah. But he
Right.
went even further at one point. He said if he was indeed a failed Messiah candidate, the failure wasn't his. The failure was the failure of Israel at that time. Because part of
Ha.
Mashiach, it's not just Mashiach, it's the age of
Uh-huh.
Messiah, right? And it requires the whole people of
Right.
Israel. So it's a very nuanced view that my dad has. I think
Hmm.
he's on the right track. We just, um, but
If I
obviously
would
we
say
defer
so,
in terms of
yes.
who Mashiach is, right? So
Right.
there you go. A lot
You're
of
planting
subtlety, a lot of
seeds.
nuance there.
Yes, you are planting
Well,
seeds, and little by little,
yeah, yeah. We'll see. We'll
yeah,
see. It's about the
we'll see.
relationship. We're still fighting the good fight. So
Yeah, and I love how you guys are fighting. He recommends a book, you recommend a book. We're all reading
yeah,
books, and we're not throwing punches, and so I like that type of fight.
yeah, yeah. But there were some
Well,
dark
how
days.
did
I got to tell you, when he first rejected this whole notion, it was
Yeah.
good 3 years, if not longer, before there was any sort of peace and joy, even
Mhm.
remote bit of those ingredients in our relationship. And that means a lot. You have to have a deep conviction about a decision that you're making in order to be willing to risk
Right.
the acceptance and the embrace of the person who you look up to the most. So that was a
Right.
very trying time for us. But glad we discovered resilience, and we're given resilience. You know, God will not tempt you
Yes.
beyond what you are able. He will not. You could say he will
Yes.
not test you beyond what you are able, and He gives you the way out of it
Yes.
too. So
He does. And a lot of us, we just sit and worry because you expressed how much your father means to you. And so most people, especially like if that was me and it was my mom, because I don't have a relationship with my dad really, but I would be sitting there every day. I mean, for 3 years, I'd be like, so do I go to Thanksgiving this year? Do I buy
mm,
her something for Christmas this year? Should I send a card this year or she throw it in the garbage can? Like I would be thinking all these things like, oh no, is she ever gonna come back around? Are we ever going to work it out? Because I guess my mind just goes. But in the Bible, it also says, worrying doesn't basically come up with a solution. That's my
So
outcome of it, like in my own words, because the Bible doesn't say that. But worrying doesn't add another day to your
does
life.
not.
Worrying doesn't help you find a solution. So you're just basically worrying. And I did see this meme, like actually today before I got on with you, and it says, we're sitting down worrying ourselves about something God has already found the answer to and solved. So we're
Yeah.
just waiting for time to catch up to us. And I was like, that's right.
Well, one of my favorite verses, Reese, is be anxious for nothing, but in all things by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, that the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. So sometimes I can't
Yes.
remember it, so I shorten it to say, thank you, God, for your peace in Christ.
Thank you, Lord.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but yeah, he says it all over his word. Be anxious for nothing, but in all things by prayer and supplication,
Just for nothing.
thankful, So
That's right.
love it. I love
That's
it.
right. I had my ex, one of my ex-boyfriends, his mother used to say that to me all the time, all the time. She used to say that verse to me, and I used to not really understand it in the moment, but as time went on, because at the time I was going through PA school, I found myself starting to say it, and I was just like, oh Lord, I feel like in some of my most darkest moments or hardest moments, that's probably what got me through over the hump, just
Yeah.
reciting that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or be still and know that I am God. He does just be
That's
still.
another one.
It's okay.
Being still is so hard.
Man,
Being still is so hard sometimes.
it is.
All
It
the
is.
time.
He made the
Ah,
whole world be still for about a year in 2020. So, but
and I actually enjoyed like me being still, but then after a while it started to get restless and I was like,
yeah,
all right, Lord, like, all right, COVID, wrap it up.
yeah, yeah.
Wrap it up.
That's right. That's right.
Well, you did mention like you were in the stock, you started off in business, and you were telling me before like one of the biggest downfalls was like the financial collapse of the stock market in 2008. Well, I
Yeah,
want to
that's
say
right.
2020. Well, so like I want to say like during that time, how did you guys make it through? Like what was some of the most hardest things financially, of course, that you had to go through, and what were some decisions that were really, really hard, and what motivated you to keep seeing the light at the end of the tunnel?
Yeah, yeah. So know that I was well out of the stock market at that time. I'd gotten out of the stock
Okay.
market and had built some other businesses. One was like a consulting, headhunting business. Another one was like a service business, window cleaning, pressure washing, stuff like that. And I was very proud of the businesses that we had built. So
Mm-hmm.
some of it was my lack of ability to submit to that verse that I just shared, to not to
Yes.
be anxious. So in the years leading up, starting in really late 2007, and
Uh-huh.
then well into 2009, I was struggling because I was anxious about, well, if this happens, then X, Y, and Z is going to happen. Then I can't do X, A, B, and C. And it was just like, I mean, you know how it is. Your
Yes.
mind just goes.
Right. It
So
goes.
yeah,
Yes.
but so there was a lot of inner turmoil leading up to that because I saw something happening that I could not control. It was like,
Right.
it's kind of like when you're in the ocean and you see a wave coming and
Mm-hmm.
your innards are just like struggling because you want that wave to be different, but the wave is
Right.
is what it is. You can
Right.
either drown under it or you can ride it. So
Yes.
but there were some critical decisions. The most excruciating one for me was at the end of 2000. It took a long time for all the dominoes to fall. But at the end
Right.
of 2012, we finally got to a point where we could either pay our mortgage or meet our payroll. And
Mm-hmm.
I love the people that were on our team. I just absolutely am devoted to them and people that I loved
Mm-hmm.
and were committed to. And so for me, it wasn't really a choice. I hated that fact that I had to make that choice, but it wasn't really a choice. We
Right.
met payroll. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so that started a process of us eventually losing our house. You know,
Yes.
in a way, we were fortunate because we lost. Like there was only a bunch of bad options. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but you know, we did what's called a short sale. It was the least bad of a bunch of bad options. So,
Yeah.
but you know, my kids were in their formative years, and it's the house where they grew up in, and
Right.
it's like, especially those last couple of years before we finally had to leave the house, it's kind of like you're walking around in a coffin. You know, it's kind of like, you know, having, or maybe that's not the greatest analogy, but like having a person who's in hospice in your house, knowing that something is
Right.
inevitable, that has a conclusion that you're not going to be happy about, but it's going to happen, you know? So we finally left that house. And even after we left, there was still a lot of mess to clean up. And I was just committed to us getting back on our feet, you know, to the kids, not, you know, to us having a roof over our heads. And, you know, just there's a lot of humbling that goes on during that whole process, you know. So uh, it was just that, I think that's when I really started to learn, like, in the Lord's Prayer, give us this day our daily bread. You know,
Yes.
I learned, like, I wanted not our daily bread, but like, hey, Lord, can you give us our monthly bread? You know, our yearly
Yes.
bread? Can I get
Yes.
my
Can you
retirement bread?
extend this bread?
Yeah,
Can you
but
spare it?
right, right. But you know, mana, if you tried to hoard it and save it so that you had some for tomorrow, that stuff would
Right.
go spoiled, you know? So that was
Right.
a time where we had literally our daily bread. We're like, okay, we got through the day,
Right.
you know? And then
Yes.
eventually over between 2012 and 2000, what was it, 50? So we're in this house, we got into this house three and a half years ago. So it was 2018. So it was really that time between 2015, 2018. It was just like one day at a time, one foot in front of the
Right.
other, daily bread. And
Yes.
I ended up paying off every cent of debt that we had. And it was a lot. It was like, it was a lot. It was seven figures worth of debt and just one
Uh-huh.
creditor at a time. And
Yes.
the best experience of that was there was one piece of debt that we had with a local bank, because those last few years leading
Mhm.
up to us missing our mortgage and that whole process starting, I was borrowing a lot of money so that I could cover payroll. So there
Right.
was a local bank and friends of mine that I'd see out, you know, out in the grocery store or on a soccer field or something. They were the
Yeah.
executives of this bank, and I owed them a lot of money. And the last piece of debt that I paid off, I had worked my butt off and sold a bunch of stuff and did whatever I could. I just rubbed two sticks together and figured out how to make it work. And finally, I had this big old check to pay off the Bank of Santa Clarita. And I went in there and I was just gonna, you know, give it to the teller. She didn't know me, but I just knowing and being able to go outside and, you know, do whatever, just celebrate on my own. And she looked at the check and she knew me. And she said, "Can
Right.
you wait here for a second?" I'm like, "Am I in trouble? You guys gonna?" But she got this other fellow, a guy named Craig Connor, the fellow
Uh-huh.
that I knew, and he's the guy that works with the SBA and got me the loan in the first place. And he said, "Oh man, this is great, Corey. I am so happy for you. I'm happy for the bank, obviously, because a lot of the stuff we just never get paid back." And he said,
Right.
"Wait here for a second." And he went in the back and he got the president of the bank. And the president of the bank came
Wow.
up front and he shook my hand. He said, "You're gonna get emotional again." He said, "You're a man of your word. I really appreciate that. You know, I really appreciate you, you know, doing what you had to do and paying us back, because, you know, not everybody does that." So that just meant a
Right.
lot to me, that we were back, that we had dug out of that hole, but that it
Right.
affected people's lives. The fact that we were able to do that, there were other people that were affected by that. People in my neighborhood, people in my community, people that I go to church with. So I was
Right.
just really proud of that. And you know, fast forward a couple of years, we were able to get back into a house and, you know, get back on our feet. And it's been,
Right.
it's definitely it's hard developing resilience like that. But it's definitely
It
worth it,
is.
you know? Uh,
Yes, that at the time, what did your wife do?
well, Lisa was still, we call her the EVP of domestic affairs. So our three of our kids were very much on the move and had great
Uh-huh.
needs. And every time that we measured out what the best option for us was, she wasn't in a position to get a job that would exceed the costs of having to cover the needs for the kids, because for the most part, we were all out here on our own. We didn't have family or extended family for
Mhm.
most of the time that we've been out here. Um, my brother had moved out. Actually, my brother had moved out in 2008, but you
Mhm.
know, by that time we were so far into our family life, we didn't have like these other extended family resources to rely on. So we just
Right.
decided that Miss Lisa is going to stay as she's going to stay at home, and she's going to be the executive of our kid. We have three kids, thank God. So that's what she
Yes.
was doing.
Okay, gotcha, gotcha. So everything, even though in the midst of it, you had no idea how it was going to end, what the outcome was going to be, you just knew if I keep trucking, if I keep doing what I have to do, we'll make it through this.
Yeah,
And you kept just one day at a time. I love that.
yeah,
And
yeah. That's right.
the reference of manna, I think that's very important too, because people forget. Give us this day our daily bread. And so people forget. Yes. So I like that you used all those references because it's going to help someone.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Reese, I don't know if you'd be able to edit this out, but I see on my timeline that I don't have those lines that indicate that it's picking up that I'm talking. Is that a is that going to be a problem?
Oh, no, it's indicating that you're talking on my side.
Oh, okay. All right. That's all that's important then.
Yeah. Okay. No, you're fine.
Okay. Sometimes when I'm recording, I look at the indicators. I'm like, I forgot to press a button. We're like already 45 minutes in. So
No.
that's cool. Reese has got it taken care of.
Yes, I do want to ask you though, for anybody out there that might be going through financial difficulty or just difficulty with, they might be of another faith or background and they want to switch to Christianity or switch to something else and they don't know how to do it. Like what type of advice would you give someone in that predicament?
Oh boy. Well, I'd love to give just an easy, digestible little meme or something like that. I just don't.
Yeah.
Here's what comes to mind is um, right about that time that all that stuff was starting to happen.
Mhm.
I was wrestling with mental illness. 'Cause mental illness runs on both sides of my family, um,
Uh-huh.
and especially faced with great turmoil and challenges. Um, it was exacerbated. Some of those things that where my head goes, whether
Mhm.
you might call it depression or a certain form of bipolarity, they were
Yes.
exacerbated when circumstances like that were happening. So I
Right.
started studying this thing, and I tried the getting diagnosed, and I tried medication for it. So in
Mhm.
I no way like don't take my word for it, but my own experience was that the medication didn't achieve the results that we were looking for in different combinations of
Right.
medication. So I looked for
Uh-huh.
other forms of help, and a lot of it, to your point, Reese, like you've talked about this in your first season, working on yourself, right?
Yes.
Working internally, working with the Lord. So I developed what's now kind of my morning ritual. I wake up usually pretty early in the morning. First thing I do is
Uh-huh.
I read the Bible. Now, if you're not a Christian, I don't know, give the Bible a try, but there's plenty of transcendent literature, whether it's something from if you're a Buddhist or some other faith or philosophy tradition. There's good transcendent wisdom, and if it's lasted a few thousand years, give it start your day with it. It's like you're kind of giving your mind a shower to start the day with good
Yeah.
wise material, right? So I start reading the Bible. Then I have, you see in my back, I have all these books. I'm a reader. So, like I mentioned, C.S. Lewis or G.K. Chesterton, or, right now I'm reading, there's a fella, I don't know if you've ever heard of him. His name is J. Cameron Carter. He's this great
I have
theologian. And
Jake.
he wrote about I forgot what he calls it, but it's like the theology of race, like how race and racism started sneaking its way into theological conversations. He's a very profound thinker of our day. So I
Uh-huh.
read, stuff outside of the Bible, but that is nurturing and nourishing for my mind. I write, which a lot of people would take that slot of time for a more traditional prayer time. But my prayer time, my conversation with God, I write because it forces
Yeah.
me to slow down my thoughts,
Uh-huh.
enough to be able to articulate them. And there's no real
Mm-hmm.
the only structured part of the writing. It's usually just like I'm talking to God because
You're right.
because you can't BS God, right? So that's the most important part is
Right.
you don't try to put on some other thing. You just like you talk to God, right? The only structure in it is I force myself to not force myself, but the only part of the writing is that I make sure to try to do every day is be thankful. What am I thankful for? What am I grateful for? So I read the Bible, I read good material, I write, then I go for a walk. That's my exercise. I'm getting old. You see my gray hair. I'm getting old. So I go for a walk. About half the time, I'm just listening to the birds. There's deer this time of year I see, and I pass
Right.
horses all sometimes, and so it's a good walk. I usually go for about an hour, hour and a half.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'm listening to podcasts. I listen to a bunch of your episodes.
Oh,
So
thank you.
I walk. I take vitamins. And then by the time I've come back from all that, reading the Bible,
Right.
reading, writing, walking, it's a great way to start the day.
It
Because you're
is.
setting the pace for the day. The day's not setting the pace on you. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So that's those are just some. I have some other things that I do that are personal to me, but a
Mm-hmm.
lot of it is just like working on the greatest commandment: love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the other commandment is
Yes.
like it: love your neighbor as yourself. Love the Lord with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. You got to work on that stuff, right? You
You
got to work
do
on your heart, soul, mind, and strength. So all those things that I
every day.
do are meant to prepare my heart, and to um, uh, focus my soul, and to just like all those things. That's all a pillar of who we are as human beings.
That's
So
right.
I don't know if that answers your question, but that's the best I can come up with in terms of how to get through that stuff. How to deal with that
Yes.
stuff.
I mean,
So
stay connected and, nourish yourself and, nourish your relationship with the Lord and he will take care of the rest. One of the things that one of my preachers said, I watch Stephen Furtick. I went to Elevation for a little while when I was in Virginia, and he used to say, nothing that you're going through is by surprise. Your whole life was planned out by God. So he knew that it was coming, but this is just another test of faith. Are you going to believe in him enough to know that he got your back? Like that you're going to make it through it. The plan is already set. You're going to get through it, but do you believe enough to know? Like, what are you going to do in the meantime until you get through it? And so that had me thinking. And I think it was one sermon he preached. He said, "The Lord is not bound by time." So we're in the present moment, but the Lord has already prepared the way. He has gone before us, and so there's nothing you can do or say, or like you said, put on a fakeness for the Lord. He knows you. He created you.
yeah, yeah,
So yeah, so I think that that's awesome advice in order to get through any hardship. Just, take care of yourself and then take care of your relationship with God. I think that's important. And setting the tone for the day, reading the Bible or reading whatever faith and exercising releases endorphins and
yeah,
all the things. So I love that.
yeah,
I
yeah.
love
Every,
that.
every moment is another act of creation. God,
It
you're right that
is.
God is outside of time, but He is also working inside of it, and He is the creator.
Yes.
And so every moment is another act of creation, and He's allowed us to
Right.
be in His creation. He's allowed us to be in the present, which is a part of His creation. But the present is like the
Right.
intersection of time and eternity. Like it's kind of a weird
Yes.
concept to think about, but that's where we are. That's where we are. So
Right. And he's everywhere. He's just wonderful. He is wonderful, Lord. But
Yeah.
for my audience, like where can they find you? Like if they want to connect with you, or if they found you very interesting and insightful, or if they want to talk to you, or
Or
like
give
where
me
can
credit
they
for all
find you?
the stuff that I just said. Like that. What are you talking about, man? Yeah, feel free. I love to engage. If I could do it with my dad, I'm happy to engage. But I always like to do it
Yes.
with winsomeness. You know, as they say,
Uh-huh.
make a ready defense for the hope that's within you, but with gentleness and respect. So that's where I like to be. But you can find me
Yes.
on Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram. It's all Coreys as in Sam, or my middle name Scott.
Uh-huh.
Coreys Nathan Nathan. Or you can find us on
Okay.
we do this on our podcast. It's called Talking Politics and Religion Without Killing Each Other. And and it's all like talking with the apostrophe after the end and killing. So talking politics
Right.
and religion without killing each other. And that's TP&R pod on Twitter and Instagram and all that. TPANDR pod.
Well, I'm definitely going to subscribe and listen to your podcast as well, and make sure that I listen. I think that would be interesting, talking politics and religion without killing the two most controversial type topics there is. And I'm just like, you got me with the title, Without Killing Each Other. I want to see
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. It's fun.
Yes.
It's a
So,
lot of fun. We get all
yes,
kinds of great guests on there. We should have you on someday, Reese. You'd be great. It'd be great to have you on
I
there.
love to.
Yeah, that'd be fun. That'd be
Yes,
fun.
I would love to. Of course. Just let me know. We'll be in touch through email, because now that you've been on the show, you're family now, and you can't get away from me now. There's nothing you can do about it. We love you. We embrace you as family. I know my audience listening, they love you too. And so please go support Corey and his podcast. Go subscribe. Go find him on social media and let him know what you thought of the podcast episode. I thought that this was a wonderful interview.
I really enjoy.
And I
I feel like
enjoyed
you
you.
indulged me and I talk too much, but I thank you for it. You're a great listener, Reese. I
Oh,
really appreciate getting to know you a little bit better.
of course, yes, definitely. I mean, and then outside of this, even if it's not to be on the podcast, just checking up on each other, we'll stay in touch through email, of course. But I thank you so much for taking time out your day just to come on and share your story of resilience. You touched on a lot of good points, and I just feel it that this episode is going to help someone. So thank you so much.
That's encouraging. Thank you, Reese.
Yes, and thank you guys for listening. Until the next time, guys, thanks for listening. Don't forget to go to the website, and we'll be back in 2 more weeks. Bye, guys.